So as we're just getting some seats on the front or on the side. So I just wanted to thank you all for coming, and a big thank you to Cindy for coming here and speaking tonight at the library. And as you all know, she is an author. She's here to talk about her book, and I will turn it over to Cindy. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. It's nice to see so many people interested in this subject, mental health. And mental health is health, right? We all know it. Question? You need me louder? Oh boy, that's gonna be a problem. We have one chair up front. Two. I'll try my best. Oh, yeah, I can get mine. Would you like me to be mine? Yeah, better. We're getting old.
Might be too much.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? All right. You can't hear me? Okay. Thanks everyone for coming. So tonight I'll be talking about some current mental health statistics, my family's experience with mental health, and the challenges and solutions that we found with both Austin's physical and mental health issues. We also took a little bit from Western medicine and a little bit from Eastern medicine and found them very helpful. And I'll also talk about some parent and caregiver do's and don'ts. Wish I would have known them earlier myself, but now that I do, I'm able to share them. And talk about how mental health affects the whole family. And I have a second book in me. Actually, I wrote, my first manuscript was 400 pages long, and people told me, no, you need to separate that. It's too much information. So hopefully you'll enjoy the first book and want to read the second one as well. Oh, and I forgot to tell you how to do that. Teach me how to do this. Next slide, please. Down there. Okay. Thank you. So I like to say that mental health is health, and there's no shame in talking about mental health. We actually need to break the stigma around it. And this is one way to do it, right? By having open conversations about it. We kept most everything to ourselves as we were going through it. And a lot of people knew little bits of what we were going through, but definitely not everything, because it was almost too much for us to bear. So we couldn't ask anyone else to hold our secrets either. But that's why I'm here tonight to talk about it. And when we think about mental health issues and addictions, we would never blame or ignore or ridicule anyone for getting cancer. So why do we do that with people with mental health struggles or addictions? And mental health issues are really just an illness or a dis-ease. Something from their past is coming up and they can't quite get over it, or maybe it's something in their current life they just can't seem to control. Is something we all like to do or to maneuver through, but no one is to blame. Not the child, not the parent, not the spouse. It just happens. Oh, and I'm unable. Oh, okay, what did I use? Oh. All right, so on the screen, you'll see some common mental illnesses as diagnosed: anxiety disorders, psychotic mood disorders, personality, eating, and substance use disorders. And then the diagram on the right is some common diagnoses for mental health issues. A good cheerleader. So I took some statistics, and this came from NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. And the adult mental health statistics are staggering, but for children, it's even more unbelievable. 20% of us, 1 in 5 of us has a mental illness. 1 in 20 of us experienced a serious mental illness at some point in our life or will. And 1 in 15 of us has a substance use disorder. And we found access to care to be unbelievably disheartening. And especially when Austin was up in Eau Claire in a more rural area, it was very hard to find any help. And from NAMI also the youth statistics. 1 in 6 US youth age 6 to 17 experiences a mental health disorder annually. That's a lot. And 50% of all mental illness begins by age 14, which some of us don't realize that kids that young can actually have a mental illness, but it certainly is more prevalent now than it was before. 25% experience mental illness at age 25 or older. And suicide is the second leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 34. And the suicide rate in the United States has increased by 35% since '99. 78% of people who die by suicide are male, and our lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. And transgender youth are nearly 12 times more likely to attempt. So what we need more in this world is compassion. And more mental health statistics from NAMI. Who has serious thoughts of suicide? Well, 1 in 20 of us is walking around thinking about it. Consider that. Ugh. 1 in 3, 18 to 25-year-old. 1 in 5, all high school students. 2 out of 5 LGBTQ youth, and 52% of those same youth who identify as transgender or non-binary. Staggering. Here's a few more suicide statistics. It is the 4th leading cause of death among people aged 35 to 44, 5th among 45 to 54. And for women, ages 45 to 64 is the most common time period that they might be successful in suicide, which I hate when they say that, successful, but that is what they call it. And men age 75 and older. And of course, the pandemic is making things much worse. In August 2020 to February of 21, recent symptoms of anxiety or depression went up 5%. And now, instead of 1 in 5 of us, 1 in every 2 of us will be diagnosed with a mental illness at some point in our life. And unmet mental health care needs increased from 9.2 to 11.7%. So 1 in 10 people are not getting the help that they need. Oh, let's talk a little bit about me. Thank you. Second grade photo. So I was born Cindy Lees, and I was raised Cynthia Jo Lees. And I was raised on a dairy farm along with my 10 siblings. And I had very strict Catholic parents. We got to say the rosary every night during Lent, but Art had to say it every night all year long. We worked hard baling hay, tending a 2-acre garden, canning everything, cleaning, doing dishes by hand, milking, picking eggs from those chickens that would peck your arms. But we also played hard too. We had enough people to have teams for kickball, baseball, basketball, red light, green light, kick the can, and we loved playing rummy in the wintertime. We kept one going all the time. And so my family has grown from mom and dad and 11 children to 80 strong. And this was a few years ago, so we've added a few. And Art and I met in college at UW-Platteville. And as I said, he got to say the rosary every night. And we were both number 8 in our family. So we kind of felt like we were meant to be. And he has 90 plus people in his family now. So Art and I met at UW-Platteville, dated for 3 years, and then we got married in 1987. And Calvin, our oldest, was born in 90, Elise in 93, and Austin, who the book is about, was born in 1995. And if I do say so myself, he was so cute. He had the blondest hair and was just a joy to have around. So the last 5 years of my life, and especially during the pandemic, I had time to finish my book. I've been working on it diligently, and I wouldn't have done it without Austin's assistance, without Austin's permission, and without him wanting it out there in the world. So I was really proud of him for helping me with it. He'd come down from Flagstaff. We were living in Scottsdale, and he'd come down once a month to help me work on the book. And he kept saying, "Mom, I don't want a shitty book about my life." And I kept saying, "I know, but I don't know how to make it better." But I'll tell you later who helped me. Kids, they say the darndest things, don't they? So I'm just going to kind of give you overviews of the book chapter by chapter. So you can see Austin's lips in this photo. He looked pretty bad. We went on a spring break trip to California, and he was just a junior in high school at the time. And he kept getting sick, and we kept taking him to the hospital and the ER and urgent care. And we thought it was thrush at first or strep throat. Who knows what it was, but it ended up, he woke up one morning with blisters on his lips, in his mouth, on his tongue, and you could see him down his throat. And he just took his face in his hands and squished them all and spat it out. And then we ran him to the ER after he showered. At least he could breathe, then he said. So we took him to the nearest hospital in California, and he was luckily treated by a doctor who worked with HIV/AIDS patients. So he knew what an allergic reaction to what we assume was his antibiotic looked like. And that's how he was diagnosed with Stevens-Johnson mucosal involvement. So anywhere he had mucus in his body, blistered. Chapter 2, Blackened and Breathless. He was released on Easter Sunday, 20 pounds lighter than when he went into that illness because he couldn't eat or drink anything for days. And all he could do was lay around. He had complete lethargy for 6 months, lay around, play video games. I'd make him walk to the mailbox and back, and he would just be wiped out. And then senior year, he was finally able to go back to school thanks to swim team and running cross country. But then he picked up every bug going around and still missed a lot of school. So he missed the whole 4th quarter his junior year, and then a lot of it freshman or senior year first semester. And he was going to pediatrician, but we switched him to an adult doctor at that point who diagnosed Austin with depression. We didn't know what depression looked like, and we didn't know why he was getting so angry all the time and obstinate, because he used to be such a fun, happy-go-lucky, always happy guy, but he surprised us with that. And then, so he was put on his first antidepressant during the winter of 2013. And then he also got an ADHD diagnosis from a sports psychologist we had him talking to. And then his depression became more and more severe, and he was exhibiting behaviors we'd definitely never seen in him before. Scary stuff, you know, not just I'm sad, I want to kill myself now. So that was hard. And in chapter 3, the doors begin to close. He had his first suicide attempt in February of 2013. It was just in our house, and he took some ibuprofen, but then it was when we got home, we were in Minnesota, and we got home and he was banging his head against the hardwood floors and the cabinets, and he was just in a lot of emotional pain at that time. And that spring break, we took Austin and Calvin to Austin because their spring breaks coincided. But then he had all kinds of anxieties. I didn't even think about flying again, like what that might do to him. I didn't understand PTSD at the time either. And then sadness and anger moved into our home. And he often wouldn't take his medications, which is such a detriment to his physical and mental health, right? Because then you don't take care of yourself when you're not taking the medication. So it was a cycle he repeated many times. And Austin turned 18 on April 24th. And so then I no longer could talk to his doctors. I could pay his bills. I could make his appointments, but I couldn't talk to the doctors unless he signed off on it. And at that point, he wasn't. So then I finally went to my first therapy appointment because I didn't know what to do. I had no idea how to help this kid because he was so out of control. And it was just something we had never experienced with the other two kids. And luckily he graduated from high school. I might have made a couple of high school teachers angry at me, but we just had to get him out of there. And thank God for Janice Gerlach. She really went to bat for him and spoke with the teachers. And she was his high school counselor at the time. And we were arguing about thank you notes because he got scholarships too and how to get those thank you notes out. So I just typed them all up, had him sign them, and out the door they went. The path of least resistance. And then summer of 2013 was actually very calm because Austin got a job at a factory. And so by the time he got home at night, well, warehouse, and by the time he got home at night, he was too tired to argue or be obstinate. And he actually stayed on his bed. So that was helpful too. And chapter 4, a momentary reprieve. Austin got into college. We dropped him off at UW Whitewater. Art and I did a happy dance on the way home. And we got to go on dates again because all three of the kids were out of the house. And I thought, wow, I'm ready to do something for myself. And I was already teaching fitness classes, and I knew there had to be more to yoga than what I learned in PIO training. And sure enough, there was. So I got my 200 hours. But then Austin came home every stinking weekend. Just when you thought you had the house to yourself. And then at Christmas, he admitted he had stopped taking his meds again and announced he was terribly depressed and wanted to go to the hospital. So we did take him in and they put him on some new meds and they let him out. And then he had to go back the next week because your insurance doesn't want you to stay very long. And they don't even have a chance to know if the drugs are actually going to work for your child or your loved one or not before they're back out again. So late in January, Austin tried to kill himself, this time with a belt around his neck, which was so scary because he was under his bed hiding from us. And then when I pulled him out, he had broken blood vessels all over his neck and face. So back to the hospital. And I like to put quotes in my book at the end of each chapter. So this is one of them. And we really thought he might live with us for the rest of our lives. But we're very lucky that he is not right now, thanks to the other treatment that he got. But isn't that scary to think about? They could be with you forever. In chapter 5, can you ever catch up? 3 times in January 2014, Austin was in a psych ward. And we had never been to one before, so it was really unfamiliar to go there, but we learned more about them. They just couldn't seem to get his medications or the combinations of meds right for him. And he was falling too far behind at UW Whitewater, so Art and I made the decision to go and pick up his stuff without telling him while he was in the hospital. And then in February, Austin was in outpatient therapy with Rogers. They have a place in Madison that you can go to, and he wrote a suicide note. And I found it, luckily. So I took it to the director there, and we took him right to Rogers in Oconomowoc. So instead of going to the same Madison hospital, we thought, let's try something new. They finally told us about this place on our 3rd trip to the psych ward. And he was transferred to an inpatient residential treatment from that hospital in Oconomowoc, which was great. And it's just for young adults. Insurance threatened to kick him out week after week because he wasn't getting with the program. But have you ever tried to tell a depressed person that they should get with the program? You think that will help? It doesn't. So anyway, they let him stay 30 days instead of the 45 to 60-day recommendation. But once he was released, he went back to work at the factory and lived with us that spring and summer and stayed on his meds because mom was there making sure he took them. And this is me. This is what we felt like when we kept taking him back to the same psych ward over and over and expecting different outcomes. It just doesn't work that way. So if you have someone who's struggling with mental health, I definitely recommend that you keep trying different places. Maybe a different hospital in Madison might have had a different effect on him. We just don't know at this point. And then sometimes you're limited by insurance too, where you can go. So you have to take all of that into consideration, but never give up. And chapter 6, the rabbit hole. Austin decided to transfer to UW Eau Claire, where his sister Elise was. And he did really well his fall semester there. And then in spring of 2015, Austin's college girlfriend had to call the police because she felt like he was threatening suicide. And so they took him in on they call it a chapter 51 hold here in the state of Wisconsin. It's called different things in different states, but it's explained up there. It's an emergency detention. So the police, you almost have to get the police involved in order to get one of those. So if you know someone who's struggling, you might advise them to call the police if they feel threatened or worried about their loved one. Who knew, right? I didn't know any of this before though. And then while Austin was in the psych ward, he decided to strangle himself with a pillowcase. And the hospital hours there were only 6 to 8 p.m., which was so different than Madison Hospital he was at. We could go 8 to 8. And there it was only 6 to 8 p.m. And I thought, why would you let mental health patients sit all day by themselves with their thoughts rather than visiting with family and friends? But every place is so different, we found. And unfortunately, the judge didn't have enough evidence to keep him in the hospital, so they let him go. So he did finish the spring semester, but not strongly at all. And he received a letter that summer saying, you're not welcome here anymore at college. So Austin had a period that summer where he didn't answer his phone for 2 days, and my mother's instinct kicked in and I went, oh no, this is not good. And he had tried to kill himself over a 48-hour period. So he tried pills first, drank some alcohol, a belt, pills, alcohol, then he tried 2 belts and showed up at our house. So we took him back to that same Madison hospital. Are we insane? Seemed that way. And they released him less than 24 hours later. And this, when we were sitting with him in the waiting room, the holding room at the hospital, we learned that he had been cutting way up high on his left thigh. And that's a pretty clear indication that he was in a lot of emotional pain. And he did return to Eau Claire for the summer, intending to work there the following year rather than going to school. But then we were going to meet Calvin's new girlfriend, who's about to be his wife in March. But Austin got wasted the night before and fell, so we agreed to meet him at an ER in Dork County. And every man has his secret sorrows, which the world knows not, and oftentimes we call a man cold when he is only sad. So important to note. Austin got a reset button. Our niece and nephew who still live in Bend, Oregon, told us about New Vision Wilderness Therapy for young adults. So the one in Oregon is for young adults, but there is one in Medford, Wisconsin for preteens and teens. But we didn't know that, of course, when Austin was struggling. So we weren't able to send him there, but it's kind of cool to know that Wisconsin has this place, if you have any friends with kids who are struggling. So I just asked Austin as I drove to Eau Claire with him to help him clean his apartment. And would you like to go and try this new thing? And he's like, yeah, I guess my life isn't working too well right now. So he agreed to go. And of course, Austin did not look up where he was going. All he knew is that he had to bring 12 pair of underwear. He didn't know he'd be living in that little tent out in the woods. And that he'd have canine therapy and be in charge of a dog. He'd have to be leashed to the dog for a day at a time. And they'd be cooking their own food and digging a latrine to go to the bathroom. And they were really rough in it. And then every few weeks, they'd have them pack up their tent and move them somewhere else. So he did run away from the program on Halloween. And then he ran away again. And mind you, insurance paid nothing. And chapter 8, up to his knees, he ran away again, but they do insist that if you want to walk away from the program, fine, but let us walk with you. So he had a lot of people trying to talk him out of it. But we had been talking to them like 9 times that day via phone, like, what's he doing now? Is he turning back? And then they finally told us, you're going to have to talk to him and tell him you want him to stay. And so we did. And the last words he said to me before he hung up on me were, fine, I'll go live in a homeless shelter in Bend, Oregon. And I'm like, oh boy. But he turned a corner and saw a sign that said Bend, 40 miles. So he knew he couldn't walk that far. So he reluctantly turned around and walked back. So that was a huge bend in the road for him. And we really loved his wilderness therapy, Leanne, because she was the first person in his life of all. Well, I guess he probably had 3 or 4 therapists by then and maybe 1 or 2 psychiatrists. And she was the one who got through to him out in the woods. And the first thing I remember that she said she did to him was shove him one time after that long walk. And he's like, what are you doing shoving me? I don't like that. Oh, you don't like that? Well, that's what you do to everybody else in your life. So that was really like an eye-opener for him. He didn't realize how he pushed away anybody who tried to help him. Chapter 9, the hamster wheel. Wouldn't you know it, Austin was about to graduate from wilderness therapy. We were already in Bend, ready for his graduation, and then he was going to go to an aftercare program because they don't recommend you go back home because often the same friends are there, the same influences. So they prefer you go to some aftercare program. But unfortunately, right before you graduate, you go to 4 or 5 days solo camping. So you're kind of away from the group, so that you can really think and write in your journal and really process everything that happened to you out in the wilderness. And he had just a terrible stomach ache and he didn't know why. So one night in his tent, he decided to pass gas and he pooped himself. And he looked down with, he must have had a flashlight because he wouldn't have had a phone in the wilderness. They take everything away from you, which is good. But he realized he had blood everywhere. And so they took him into the ER and they made him go back while they awaited the test results. So thank goodness, you know, like 20 miles of country road in Oregon, they don't really pave the roads and they don't snow plow them. They just wait for them to melt. So they're really, really rough. So he had, they let him stay in an indoor camp when he went back, a cabin. And then back to the hospital the next day, and his diagnosis was Shiga toxin producing E. coli. And we were so glad they knew it was that kind of E. coli, because if they had given him antibiotics, it could have shut his kidneys down. And he ended up, we found out where the food came from, because as soon as I got back from there, the Dane County health nurse was calling me. And I'm like, why are you calling me? They really do a good job of tracing where it came from. It was from a plant in Erlanger, Kentucky, and the name of the product was called I Am Healthy Soy Nut Butter. soy nut butter because somebody in the camp was allergic to peanut butter, so they had to have soy nut butter. Can you believe you can get that from? Anyway, that plant is no longer in existence. The FDA went in and shut him down because they had mold growing, fly infestation, rat infestation, holes in the roof, and they kept the material in the vat and just kept stirring it day after day and never cleaned it. So there were several people who ended up suing this soy nut butter company, and one of the poor kids ended up having to have a kidney replacement because they did give him antibiotics. But luckily, no one died. So 6 more days for the poor kid in the hospital, a lot of pain. And although 60 was the normal time frame for wilderness therapy, Austin made it 82. Only because he ran away 3 times. And insurance paid for none of that. And it was $100 a day. Or no, 1,000. Oh, it was only 500. No. What was Red Mountain? 500 a day. Okay. I thought it was 1,000.
The numbers got so big.
We don't know. We don't count them anymore. And that's what the poor kid looked like in the hospital. He was so out of it. Fully bearded now, though. And chapter 10, eternal hope. Austin moved to Red Mountain before launching back into the real world. He was given 3 choices and he chose to go to Sedona. And he continued on his healing path at Red Mountain, Sedona. And they do daily meditation and yoga practices. And we had weekly therapy as we did in Wilderness too. We had the therapist call us on the phone and Austin's there and we're talking about things. So working through past issues and trying to figure out who we are in the family and how we will be once he gets out of treatment. And he got back on medication, so he wasn't on anything while he was in the wilderness. And once he got there, he's like, I really need to be back on meds. So he knew. And this is when he declared his addiction to alcohol. I just said to a friend the other day, I didn't really know he had a problem, even though in the book I talk about bottles of flavored vodka being all over his room that I dumped out. I'm like, how did I not see that as a problem? But you kind of see what you want to see, I guess. But he took the foundations he learned about himself in the wilderness and kept on healing. Unfortunately, as soon as he got his driver's license back, he went and bought some beer for him and some other people in the program. So he had his first relapse. And chapter 11, letting go. In 2017, Austin graduated a little later than he could have from Red Mountain, Sedona. So that is Josh and his wife Maureen, and they own and operate the facility. And then on the left is his therapist Taylor, and she was great at Red Mountain too. And I read a really good book, and I think it was called Detaching with Love, because you just love your kids so much that you just try and keep doing everything for them, but really at this point in his life, he had to do it for himself. And then Austin moved up to Flagstaff. And another relapse. So another layer in chapter 12. He had kidney stones because once he moved to Flagstaff, he decided not to move into a sober living situation. So he was living with some college kids who were drinking and smoking pot. So guess what he did? And then he went back to RMS for their alumni program. And I have a new mantra now: relapses are part of recovery, because they sure can be. And we had to put our dog Suling down. So Austin came back to McFarland and for that, put her down, and also to say goodbye to his childhood home. And Suling was really his dog because he begged for a dog because we had to put our other dog down shortly before he got sick the first time. And insurance paid nothing except for psychiatrist bills while he was at Red Mountain, Sedona. But you can always begin again. And chapter 13, celebration. Austin has hiked the Grand Canyon 3 times since he graduated, but that was before the pandemic, so we haven't been back yet. And Leanne is the gal on the right, his wilderness therapist. She came to visit him at work, and Taylor's on the other side of him. And Austin now works where he was in recovery at Red Mountain, Sedona. And we were there the day he got his very first Rose Award, which is recognizing outstanding service excellence from RMS. And he really enjoys working there. He was a mentor for a long time for other young people who are struggling with their mental health. And he got an added title as IT director there. So he takes care of all their IT needs too. Recently, he decided to get back into therapy though, because they had an incident where it reminded him of himself, I guess. So he's doing very well and taking Tuesdays off now just to address his own mental health, which we honor him for doing that. And chapter 14, we all grew to bend. So there's our family right now. Calvin's 31. And as I said, he's getting married in March. Austin's 27 now. Elise is 29. And hey, she's the new IMMS choir director. Yeah. So this quote comes from my book. I am not a mental health expert, but boy, did I learn a great deal about mental health on this journey. And I accept that I did the best I could to help my son along the way. I'm just a regular mom hoping to help others by sharing our family's personal story. Tattoos. He's really into them, but he has them all on the right side of his body because the left side is where he cut. So he told me that if he ever gets more and he wants more, they'll all be on the right side. But he had the word survive tattooed on his bicep, and it's kind of got like heart rate monitor V's in it. And that was to celebrate surviving Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And he's got this monster size owl on his right thigh because he found the coloring pages to be very relaxing in the psych ward. And often there would be mandalas there to color. But that's not all. He's got a beautiful wolf on the outside of his right calf muscle. And I thought he got it because he got it right before he went to wilderness therapy. So I thought he got it because he was really excited to see the wolf in the wilderness, or that he saw a wolf in the wilderness sometime. I didn't know, but he just wanted it as a reminder that he loves being in nature. And then he loves swimming. So we got an otter on the inside of his calf. And they're very pretty. So solutions, Austin's solutions that he found helpful were going to wilderness therapy. Without that, I am not sure he would be here. The bad news is it costs so much money. But in wilderness therapy, they strip away every physical creature comfort you could possibly want. Your phone's gone. You don't have any money. You're all forced to wear the same clothing on the outside. You just bring underwear. Girls bring bras. And his group was mixed. It was sometimes boys and girls together. And then there was one point when they had so many kids that they split the boys and the girls apart, young men and women. They were all 18 or older. And they practiced non-traditional types of therapy. And I learned a lot about all of those. I'm kind of a researcher, so I, had to study everything he was doing out there just so I knew more about it. And he went to New Vision, which was an accredited program, which was really important. I guess there's a book out there now that kind of disses wilderness therapy, but I'm here to say it worked for us. And Red Mountain, Sedona too, highly recommend that. Kids just can't go back to where they were before because they will relapse. And I knew I couldn't bring him home because we found out through therapy that we are his triggers. So we don't spend a lot of time together. He knows we love him. We know he loves us, but he can only take us for 24, maybe 48 hours at a time at the most. But They also practice trauma-informed yoga, martial arts, meditation. He'd never meditated before, even though his mom's a yoga and meditation leader. But he loves it now. And he learned different life skills, like stuff that he just never learned because when he was 17, he got so sick and just kind of went backwards. He was more like a baby again, right? And I had to baby him back to good health. Adventure and recreation, nutrition, and there's 4 phases to the program where they give him stuff back, which I really liked. That was really important. And those group therapy sessions were vital to him too. And our solutions from Western medicine, medication is so important for people who struggle with mental health if they can't do it on their own. And the sad part is so many people think they're doing so well that they don't need them anymore. Well, they do still need their medication. That's why they're doing so well. And for Austin, it took a lot of lessons to learn that. And talk therapy. Austin takes breaks from therapy because he's been in it so long. But as I said, he just went back because he knew he needed some extra support. And I like to check in with my therapist at least 3 times a year just to get tune-ups. So I highly recommend it for yourself too if you have someone in your family that has mental health issues. And exercise is very important. Nutrition. Austin still doesn't really eat that well, but I don't care. I detach with love. I mean, I care, but nothing I can do about it anyway, so I have to accept that. And solutions from Eastern medicine, yoga, meditation, supplements, vitamin D deficiency is huge. Can't tell you enough about that, but he would take a 10,000 milligram dose, and you could almost see the energy lift in him. Like the light came back in his eyes. And digestive enzymes he is on for a while as well. They seem to be effective. Parent and caregiver dues. Do tell your loved one that you care. Ask how you can help. Take care of small tasks like chores or errands. Assist them in finding help. Come from a place of empathy and understanding. Be supportive. Research how to help your loved one. We really found NAMI to be very helpful to us, the support groups there. And I understand some hospitals have support groups. We went to Al-Anon, and that was really helpful to us too. And maintain a healthy relationship with your loved one. Try not to cut them out of your life if you can help it. And do take care of yourself. And what a parent or caregiver should probably not do, and I only know this from our experience, is minimize the feelings or dismiss their symptoms. Don't tell them they don't have those feelings, because they do. We just don't understand them. And we should not compare their feelings to ourselves or to anyone else. Don't express apathy. Don't call them selfish. And don't do too much for them. With Austin, he was back to being a baby when he couldn't do anything for those 6 months. So I felt like I babied him too much. So he had to start all over being an adult again. And mental health doesn't just affect the person who might have some mental health issues, but it affects the entire family. And I'm so glad that we went through this journey with Austin, because we all got to do family therapy with him. We all got to figure out our place in our family. So it was really healthy for the whole family to experience. And I have the Serenity Prayer up there, which is very important in Al-Anon and AA. And I dedicate my book to Victoria, and she's the one who really helped me make it into a much better book that I could be proud of. Victoria, I met in Scottsdale, and we would have courtyard happy hours where we'd all be 6 feet apart, just because it was so lonely, right? And we saw each other every Friday night. But Victoria wrote her own book called Angel on the Inside, and that was from her time in prison. And she was sent to prison because alcohol was her demon. And unfortunately, my friend who's supposed to help me write my second book, took her life right before Christmas. Yeah, alcohol is hard to compete with. So in that vein, I put up the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And about my next book, I will share how a parent or caregiver can survive when your loved one is struggling. And the ways that really worked for me were Al-Anon. I read so many books. Family, relying on your family for help, your friends, meditation, mind, body, and spirit health. NAMI was so helpful to us. Podcasts. Oh, I recommend a really good one in the new book. And Reiki. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's energy work. That really helped me through some tough times. Talk therapy and yoga. And I'll tell how we paid for treatment because it is expensive. Oh, and I have a little plug there. If you could, you too, please write a review of Bend Don't Break, either on Amazon or my publisher's website, if you could, Ex Libris. That way the word will get out to more people. Because on Amazon, the more reviews you get, the higher up you move. And Google search too. And I want you to know that if you or someone you love is struggling, you are not alone, and there is always hope. Thanks for coming tonight. I wanted to offer a time for question and answer too, if anyone has any, and then at 7-ish, we will begin the book signing. Anyone have any questions about our journey or anything you'd like to share? Wow, what a quiet group. Art Weber?
Wilderness and $500 a day at Red Hall.
Good memory. Yes. Karen.
Well, I think we don't have a lot of questions because you're so thorough, but, how is Austin going to be helping you with the second book?
I don't know that he will, because it's more about how I survived.
I thought, oh, okay. that
He-
was about-
He helped me tremendously with the first book, though. When he came down every month, he would correct me and say, no, Mom, that's not how I remember it. Or he'd say, take that out, that's too personal. Yeah, so he really had a lot of input. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about Calvin and during this journey as siblings. And you were also helping them, right? Or
Right. Yeah.
you know,
I feel like the family therapy really helped us. Calvin has been, as our oldest, was really good at setting boundaries. But Elise was like me, right there in there trying to save Austin every step of the way. So we gained a lot of assistance from the therapists at both places and beyond, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's hard on the siblings too, for sure. Never doubt that. Mhm.
Are you getting any sense that you're going to be able to visit with Austin more often, or how's that working out?
Oh, well, he comes down about once a month to see us, and that's probably enough for both of us. It works out well. We talk every week, and yeah, so we get along really well. Our relationship, I would say, has been repaired, but we do know that we are his triggers and we can set him off from time to time, so we don't push. And through therapy, we've learned how to communicate better with one another. I'd say we're a more solid family than we were going into this. Anyone else?
at the second one, I think you answered this, but when do you remember knowing or really believing that he would make it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I didn't think when he was in college that he was going to make it. And when he told me he was going to live in a homeless shelter in Bend, Oregon, I figured homelessness or jail would be next for him, or death. If he was going to reject this much help, because they were coming at him from all sides during that walk, and they were really there for him.
Did they think that the Stevens-Johnson syndrome had anything to do with what cascaded after that? Or do they think that he might have developed the depression anyway, and it was just coincidence that it came after the illness?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there is evidence to support that when you have a very serious illness, it does change your body and your brain chemistry. And it could lead to mental health issues, but we'll never know that for sure. Yeah, he didn't really exhibit too many concerning things before he was so ill. But he was definitely, like, all three of our kids are so different from one another. You just can't expect them to be the same and think the same way.
I remember after reading your book, I came to you and said I felt terribly guilty that I wasn't more help because I didn't know. So as a friend on the outside, what could a friend do for someone else going through this?
Thank you for asking that, Gail. She was there for us. She was so good with us because she knew what was going on, that she would come over and actually talk to him. And most people are just like, hey, give this to Austin, you know, or thinking of you, praying for you. But she came in our house with a meal, I think, one time and just said, I am really sorry you're going through this right now. Anything we can do for you? So Gail, you were there. You just didn't know it all because I couldn't have shared it all with anyone because it was just too much, too overwhelming. So yes, thank you, friend. And other friends brought cookies for Austin, which he loved, and just sent him notes. And you know what he really loves more than anything right now, and what kind of keeps him going, is people writing me or him notes about the book. He loves to read those and just to know that he is making an impact by sharing his life story.
So if we want to write to Austin, do we write and give it to you, or?
I can give you his address. Yeah, I'd be happy to share his address. He's a darn good kid. 27, all right? Yes.
Is he, living, you said down in Flagstaff,
Yep,
and he's still working at Sedona?
he is. Yep, he drives back and forth every day.
Is he living in Flagstaff?
He lives in a sober living house with, there were 2 roommates, now they're down to 1 other, but I guess the house is kind of falling down around him, but he likes it. He doesn't need much. Like, he's like a really simple person. He does not want for a lot of things, and he doesn't need a lot in his life. And I think that's something he learned about himself being in the wilderness. Stuff doesn't matter to him. And of all 3 of my kids, I think I have 12 of Elise's bins, maybe 8 for Calvin and 4 for Austin. He just doesn't hang on to stuff. Yeah, he loves that drive. It's really relaxing to go back and forth. And
Peaceful kind of place.
yeah. And it's actually in Oak Creek Canyon. So if you've ever been there, you wouldn't even know where it is, but it's in a strip mall across from the Holiday Inn. You wouldn't even know it's there unless you were looking for it, which is kind of cool. They make it really unobvious, if that's a word. I'm at a library. I should know this. Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Well, I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thank you for coming to hear my talk. And for those of us who've been affected and who hasn't by mental health issues, I really honor you for hanging in there with your loved one too. Mary.
Anybody that maybe figured out a little.
No, but they did want to write a case study on him at UW. I don't know if they ever did. I would have thought they would have showed us if they did, but Having a doctor in California who worked with HIV patients, knowing what allergic reaction to medication looks like was vital in trying to get an early diagnosis. And all they could give them too was pain meds, not antibiotics, because that might be what caused it.
Just if anyone knows, we were meeting with Dr. Mackey back then. You gotta be a serious case.
He was the head of infectious disease at UW.
Will you be doing more talks?
I would hope so. I have been so busy building our new house and putting stuff away that I have not pursued very many libraries. I reached out to 5 locally recently and 1 in Verona. Roger, you're from Verona? Yeah, they're so busy with programming right now because they had 2 years off from COVID that they can't fit me in this year, but maybe next summer. And maybe my second book will be done by then, so I can present both. Well, thanks, everybody. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Thank you, Anne.